Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Youngstown Click Be Connected podcast. I am so excited to be here with you today, our special guest. Today, we're somewhere different. We are actually in Salem, Ohio at the Cast Iron Soda Works, which has over 500 different kinds of soda. Now, you've been here before, right?
I have.
Have you enjoyed it?
Oh yeah, it's great. It's a great place to bring the family, and you don't have to worry about the environment here. So
Right.
it's fantastic.
Yes, it's amazing. So it's bring your own food. You could bring your own food in, bring a pizza, have a party. They have tons of board games. In fact, we have a Scrabble board mounted on the wall right here. And I mean, whoever put those words up there, I love it. Youngstown Click. So basically, Cast Iron Soda Works is a place that you and your family could come and hang out and just enjoy being without the rowdiness of a bar or the being in a restaurant
Right.
where you got to like release the table and stuff like that.
And
So
it's kid friendly.
Kid
you
friendly,
show up
yes.
here, everybody knows there's going to be kids.
right. Yeah, I love it. Okay, so it's right here in the heart of Salem, and they allowed us to record the podcast here today because our guest is from Salem. So it works out perfectly. So before I go into our sponsors real quick, I would like to introduce to our audience who you are. So go ahead and introduce yourself real quick.
All right, my name is Anthony Watt. I am the clinical director at Family Recovery Center. I'm a licensed therapist.
Okay.
I've been doing it roughly 8 years.
Wow.
So it's been quite the process.
Oh, I'm sure.
Originally, I'm from the Seattle, Washington area.
Okay.
Moved out here for college, got offered a job, and stayed in the area.
Nice. All right.
That's the basics about me.
Right.
Married, have a kid on the way.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's funny because they say that around here we have a lot of cloudy and rainy days, but Seattle is worse, right?
Actually, it's about the same.
No way.
So the only real difference is that when it's snowing here in the winter, it would be raining there. Otherwise, the cloud cover's about the same.
No way.
True
Okay.
story.
So no like I moved here from Cali and I miss the sunshine.
No,
No.
none of that. No, actually,
That's
it gets
great.
warmer here and colder here. So
Really?
It does.
Wow. So it's just more moderate over there.
it is.
Huh, good to know. Good to know.
Being 30 miles from the ocean does that. So
Right. Yeah. Oh man. So did you ever go to the beach in Seattle? I mean, like, is
so
there...
in the Seattle area, it would be more the bay. The actual
Oh, the bay,
ocean is
okay.
an hour and a half drive.
Got
and
it.
then you have a 14,000 foot mountain in your backyard. So, it's great.
Man, wow.
So it stays pretty moderate because of the mountain range.
Wow. Okay. Well, see, so we all learned a little bit about Seattle.
Right.
Okay, so today Anthony is licensed in several different areas. You've done counseling and stuff. Today we're going to focus a little bit on the one thing that really impacts us all is relationships. So I'm super excited for you to come and sit down with us and pick your brain about relationships, because it's something that no matter whether it's just your born family or created family relationships, we all have those struggles. We all have those questions, those misunderstandings. So I'm super excited to get into this. So before we do that, let me just real quick mention our sponsors, Ohio Flame. Ohio Flame is a custom steel fire pit company. They create their fire pits right here in Columbiana. And they are created to be the centerpiece and the talk of the bonfire. So I always say nothing quite brings community together quite like a bonfire. Strangers become friends. And so if you love those outdoor get-togethers, or you have a business and you want it to be a place of gathering, definitely consider ohioflame.com for your fire pit. And then the Gallagher downtown. The Gallagher does Airbnbs. They do long-term stays, and they're actually putting in a restaurant down there called the Varsity Club. And it's right in the heart of downtown Youngstown. So if you have family or friends coming that need a place to stay, consider the Gallagher. They're newly renovated, got tons of great reviews from people coming in who have either stayed there or their family has stayed there, and they just rave about how nice it is, the accommodations and the location. So thank you to both of our sponsors for sponsoring us today. And let's get right into it. So talk to us real quick about a little bit about, you do like couples counseling. Is that like, talk to us a little bit about your credentials when it comes to relationships?
All right. So in the state of Ohio, I have a dual license. I have my license is an LPCC, which just means I'm a professional counselor or a
Okay.
professional clinic counselor.
Okay.
So it looks like a big alphabet when you throw it on the wall. It's a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
letters to just
it
mean I went
does.
to school and did a thing somewhat okay.
Got
So
it.
the LPC is a licensed professional clinical counselor.
Okay.
That's where I am. And then I have the LICDC, which is a licensed independent chemical dependency counselor. So that's for the substance abuse side.
Okay.
So with those two credentials, I'm technically qualified to do pretty much the spectrum of
Got
mental
it.
health or addiction services.
Okay. Now, have you seen counseling really help change or save relationships?
I have. So in the last, this took off in the last 4 years for me as far as doing relationship counseling,
Okay.
which is always interesting for me because, I'm younger in my field.
Yeah.
And so most of the couples I've worked with were old enough to be my parents or had kids older
Wow.
than me, which was always interesting.
Yeah. And
Right.
you see it changing, like, what is it? Just more of an understanding or just being heard?
Usually it's a more of a miscommunication. I'm
Okay.
trying to think of the proper way to word it, but
Okay.
usually there's just a communication difference where I think I'm telling you something and you think I'm telling you
Ah,
something else, or you think that I don't care because I'm not doing something that you think I should do. So you think I'm a mind reader or something like that, and it doesn't
right.
really work because they're not communicating their expectations to each other.
So, and that's a surprise that some of the people that you're dealing with or could be your parents, because by that age, you'd think and you'd hope for, you know what I mean, that, oh, we got it figured out. We know each other like the back of our hand,
Right.
but it's not like that. So
Not
it's a
at all.
constant evolving process.
Correct. So what I've seen, and this is some of it's based in actual studies, some of it's just what I've seen. So I'm not going to quote any
Yeah.
citations or anything like that today. So this is me speaking,
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
the field. So it's all on me on this one. But
Okay.
what I've seen, especially with I guess my older clientele that I've worked with, is that most of their marriage they focused on the kids and they forgot to spend time with each other, or they stopped spending time with each other. So for 25, 30 years, however many kids they had, or how big that span was, or the gap between the kids, they go from, you're dating, you spend every day together. You're
Right.
doing as much together as you possibly can. You have a kid, and now all of the attention goes to that kid. And then you
Got
have the
it.
next one, and all the attention goes to that kid. Everything
Okay.
revolves around the kids at that point. And so the kids leave, they go to school, they go off, start their own families, move out, whatever. And now it's just you two in the home again. And you don't know how to communicate with each other because you haven't done anything together for 25 years. And so, you've been successfully married for 25 years, but your commonality was the kids. And now that's
Oh, that
gone.
would be such a tough place to find yourself.
Right.
So what can people do in that, if they find themselves in that
Once they
situation?
get to that position, start going on dates.
Yeah.
Get to know each other again.
Okay.
Be intentional about it. Don't just assume the other person knows, because you're going to have to find things you enjoy doing together again.
Got it.
And I've only been married 5 years,
Okay.
and I still run into that where I'm like, oh, I need to do this thing, and I teach people this, and I still catch myself doing
Right.
it. I'm
Right.
like, oh, I just talked to these people about this. I'm like, I haven't done that in the last 6 months. Maybe I should do
Wow.
that, because you just get so wrapped up. I go to work, I come home, kids are there.
Wow.
It's, hey, let's go do something. Let's take
Yeah.
the kids, right?
Right. Now,
So
and from what I understand, so okay, like, how does your wife respond when you come home or whatever and say, hey, let's go on a date? How does she respond? I know that traditionally, when somebody is wrapped up in the kids, I've heard like grandparents and stuff say, oh, we don't have time for that. We don't have money for that. But I would think that, most women would be like, oh, great. But like, so how do you find resistance, not just in your marriage, but like in other people doing that?
So it really depends on a lot of times on the age of the kid, for one. So I'm actually currently working with a couple. You'll never know who they are.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried telling this story,
Yeah.
but they have 3 kids.
Okay.
The newest one is, I think, 4 months old. Mom won't leave the 4-month-old alone. So the 4-month-old goes everywhere, even though the 5 and the 3-year-old can go off with grandparents, aunts, and uncles, but
Right.
the 4-month-old has to go. And so sometimes there's an attachment issue there where, oh, the kid's going to die if I'm not there. That's not the
Right.
case.
That,
Yes, infants, or I guess human infants especially, are extremely vulnerable. And so,
yes.
yes, that instinct is good to be there and want to help the kids or be there for them. But at the same time, you actually have to do that for your marriage.
Right.
So I've actually been studying this a little bit because I'm trying to figure it out. And really, in our culture, or Western culture in general, we're the only culture that really puts the kids before the marriage. So
Really?
the kids come first in everything that we do.
Yeah.
In every other culture, the kid is secondary. Like
Really?
the kid almost serves the family, where we've kind of reversed that role where, oh, they have football, they have baseball, they have dance, they
Right.
have
They become,
gymnastics. We have to meet their schedule rather than them
yeah.
conforming to ours.
That is interesting because you're right. When I was growing up, if there was something on a Sunday, we didn't do it. And now I see a lot of people who used to go to church regularly. They're like, oh, we can't make it because our kids are in this, our kids are in that. And I literally, I've noticed that how the kids become the main thing back when, even when I was growing up. I mean, the neighborhood kids used to all play together and we used to do our thing, but we definitely knew when that time was up or when we had chores or like we weren't allowed to go play because we had chores, you know.
Right. Light comes on, it's time to go home,
Yeah,
right? That sort of
right.
thing.
Oh man, yeah, for sure. That's interesting. So you don't see that around the world then, huh?
Not really.
Wow.
So, and I was actually just listening to another podcast last night about people who are much more professional or much higher educated than I am along
Okay.
these lines. And they were talking about that in other cultures, they also don't protect the kids as much as we do. And there's
Interesting.
something to that as well.
Interesting.
So, for example, I guess kids in Israel at the age of 8, they're expected to get themselves on the bus, get to school, get home from school. And what they found following some of these kids is that on the way to get on the bus, they would actually go into stores, they would interact with people, they would buy themselves breakfast. They were actually doing things where, I
Wow.
mean, I drive to work some mornings and, we kind of live in the middle of nowhere. I mean, Salem's
Yeah.
roughly 11,000 people,
Yeah.
and the parents are waiting at the bus stop with the kids,
Right.
and we're in a really safe community,
Right.
you know,
Right.
where we're talking in some countries that have some conflict going on. They're like, yeah, you can take care of this. You can do that. And so
Wow.
we've taken all of the safeguards away,
Right.
or added all of the safeguards where other countries don't really do that as much.
Okay. And so what effect do you feel like that has on kids when they're growing up or in relationships?
They don't grow up.
Oh.
So they look to their parents or to somebody to make all of the answers or to give all of the answers. And so they can't really interact on their own without having somebody to tell them what to do.
Thus, why it would be another challenge for parents with grown kids to truly care about their marriage, even at that point, if their grown kids still need them and are pulling on them.
Right.
Interesting.
And
And if you go on in caretaker mode for 20 years, 18 years, that would be probably hard to shut off. If that
Right.
becomes your identity as mom and mom and mom,
Right.
it would, yeah, that would definitely be a challenge.
And it's also, I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but it's also led to the therapy field blowing up, because
okay.
now I believe the statistic was 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. has a mental health diagnosis,
Oh,
which
man.
that is a little ridiculous to me, but I'm going to get myself in trouble, like I
Right.
said.
No,
But
right.
basically, what you have is that generation of kids that was protected now having kids, and they don't know what to do with them. And so they're sending them to therapy. And if I'm being completely honest, not all therapists are good.
Right.
Half the
Yeah.
time I'm questioning whether I'm doing the right thing or not.
I'm sure. I'm sure it's a struggle and a challenge.
Right.
I did see, it's interesting. And again, they'll never know who this is. So, basically, I saw the situation though, how a mother was dating a new guy, and they, moved her and her kids in with him, and every challenge that they would have, it was like volatile for the kids. They didn't know, are we going to have to move out? Are we going to, so it creates a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. So that started demonstrating and manifesting itself. And so they took the girl who was this vivacious, happy, outgoing. I mean, I knew her since she was a child, and she was always just so happy and so the one to kind of get people together. And they took her to a therapist. And the therapist, rather than saying, hey, there's some family issues here that might need to, for the sake of your children, might need to be resolved, they said, oh, she has this. They gave her a diagnosis. And so I remember how like horrified I was when I first found out that they had put her on antidepressants to deal with the anxiety. And I was like, like I try to say something, but you know, people, you're not a doctor, you know?
Right.
And I have just watched her life, now 10 years later, I have just watched her struggle in dealing with adult issues as she became an adult, these highs and lows of emotion, just nothing like the kid. And I can't help but think, nothing's one dimensional, but it wasn't hard to see that it was the parents' issues, not this inner, dysfunction of the child. Right. And I feel like that happens so much. Like we just want people to be quiet and to deal with our mistakes or failures as parents or adults in society. And so we tell them, hey, take this and you won't feel it. Take this and it won't bother you. Right. Take this. And I'm like, no, but these kids have emotions and they have feelings and they have thoughts and it's okay. Like you just don't want to hear them because it might, be uncomfortable.
No,
so
you're absolutely right.
My little soapbox.
Yeah, no, you're right. I get on the same one all the time.
It's sad.
But to your point, I think it was about 3 years ago, I had a well-meaning mother, hopefully, bring her kid to me. He was a teenager, had some behavioral issues, showing aggression and whatnot.
Yeah.
And one of the first things she told me is, I don't want a therapist for him that's going to say that it's all me and his dad's fault. That was one of the first things out of her mouth. Yeah.
Wow.
Right? And so I worked with this kid for 6 months, 7 months, something along those lines. And almost every session, mom wanted to come with him, which is somewhat unusual.
Okay.
I mean, I'm open to it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I start wondering, okay, what is she hiding, or does she not trust me? If she doesn't trust me, I completely get it.
Right.
If she's hiding something and making sure he's not talking, that's another story. And so finally, after about 6 months, I saw him twice by himself. And then I never saw him again.
Isn't that
so
something?
What I found out is that he was having anger issues and portraying them.
Yeah.
Apparently, mom and dad fought constantly. They were punching holes in the wall. They were throwing stuff at each other. Dad was sleeping at the office because they couldn't get along. And the kids acted out, but it's not anything to do with them. Like, you don't see the connection
so
here. But that's what happens,
man.
to your point about it being a parental issue more often than not.
Man, that hurts my heart so much.
Right.
Man,
Right.
to find out. So, okay, let's go back then to newlyweds. Okay, newly married people. Okay. So, and then obviously love, they're excited, they're building a house, and then, or they're building a household, and then they have a child. And then obviously that child needs a lot of attention and care and love.
Right.
And so what would be a good advice for somebody in that situation? Like to build so that they're not in this position years down the road.
Right. So with the newborn, you have roughly 9 months where your life is going to revolve around the infant.
Yeah.
It's just how it works. There's not much you can do about it.
Right. And it's so precious that time.
Oh, it's awesome. Honestly, for the dad, it's not that exciting because, any issue, the kid doesn't want us. It's just how it works. It's a physiological thing. They're attached to mom.
Right,
I'm
right.
a complete stranger. That's how it goes. But what you run into is a lot of parents, especially newlyweds, new parents, dad has no idea what to do with this thing. We've never been in that situation.
Right.
We're not programmed for it. We didn't carry it for 9 months.
Right.
We don't know what to do with this thing. And then mom is going, well, I don't get any help with this. And so that's where a lot of the fight goes is dad's not helping,
Interesting.
right?
Okay.
And it makes sense because we don't know what to do. And if we try, usually it doesn't work anyway. And I end up going and grabbing mom.
Right.
And so now we're both frustrated because now I went and woke her up when it's my turn and it's not working for me, but usually
So that could be a start of miscommunication right off the bat.
Right.
Then. Okay.
Right. And it's a misunderstanding where, in our society, we've kind of done the whole equal roles thing. You're both supposed to do your part. And by doing your part, we've almost turned it into you're both doing the same things. And that's not really how it works.
Interesting.
So usually a good system from what I've seen is that those first 9 months, especially, mom takes care of the kid, dad
Okay.
takes care of mom. Because I don't know how to take care of the kid. I know how to take care of her. That I can do.
I've never
Yeah.
heard that before.
And so
That's good.
usually it's dad supporting her with what she needs. She supports the baby with what it needs. And so that's
Interesting.
where a lot of the first year conflict comes in with an infant.
Okay.
'Cause nobody's getting sleep. It's usually not a pleasant time, but it's
Right.
just a phase. And remembering that it's just a phase and it'll pass is a big part of that.
Got it.
And then just speaking to newlyweds in and of itself, it seems like most of the conflict is within the first year.
Okay.
Especially if you go the traditional route where you don't live together and then all of a sudden you move in together and
Right.
now, oh, you're not as neat as I thought you were, right? Or
Right.
we have our little quirks that you didn't quite know about because
Right.
I only see you a couple hours here and there throughout the week, and now you see me
Oh,
at my
man.
worst, right? I mean,
And
nobody
then you
wants
get
to see
scared,
me in the
right?
morning,
Then I can imagine you'd get scared, like, what have I done? What have I
Right.
married? As much as you love that person.
Right.
So, okay, so that's common to have a lot of that during the first year. It doesn't
Right.
mean you made a mistake.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just not knowing each other. One thing that does help is finding a good premarital therapist for that.
Okay.
So for me, it was my pastor. He
Okay.
actually won't marry you unless you go through premarital counseling.
Wow.
And then he gives you a book of, I think it's 150 different discussion questions that you two have to talk through.
Oh, my.
And you have, I think
Oh,
it's 6
shoot.
weeks to do it.
Imagine
something
like halfway
that.
through, you're like, nope.
Yeah.
But
And
you know what?
it happens.
Really?
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess it's better than halfway through your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would rather that, 6 months into the engagement or 3 months into the engagement than 6 years down the road after we're married and now we have 2 kids and, we just built a house together and
Oh, my
now we're going to
goodness,
split
and you see
everything
that.
and, destroy the
start-
kids again. Right.
Yeah, you're right.
And so I would much rather see couples break up during the premarital counseling than go, oh, I wish I had known this 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's-
Okay, so now let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
The grade school kids, now they've made it through the first year, they've made it through the elementary years, and the kids are in grade school. Things are maybe hitting strides, but busyness is setting in.
Okay.
If it's not already been there.
Right.
So let's. What about that phase?
Okay. So that phase, anything in particular you want to cover with that phase?
Well, okay, so maybe around that phase is like when it'd be easy to be like, hey, like we can't do date night, or maybe concerned about the safety of the kids because obviously it's a dangerous world out there, and with trafficking and stuff like that, people they hold on tighter to what they love sometimes. They're building, maybe they're starting to acquire some like job promotions and stuff like that. Or maybe even like deciding on, hey, do we use daycare as opposed to a stay-at-home parent? Like, are there any studies or statistics or just inside scoop when it comes to stuff like that?
Oh, man.
I know it's so
Yeah,
loaded.
that's
I'm
like
so
4
curious.
different questions there.
Well, you're the one who went through all the training, so I just had to pick your brain and find out.
I think that was 4 different questions.
It was. You don't even have to answer any of those, but somewhere around that
Well,
area, that neighborhood.
some of that is you never ask a question or answer a question the way it's asked, because
Okay.
usually the way a question is asked has some sort of pointed direction.
Got it.
And so
Okay.
so sometimes you'll hear me talking about something that may not apply because I'm answering the question or reframing the question and trying to answer
Right.
it.
Okay. So real quick, just as a disclaimer, I don't have children and I'm not married. So this is more like I observe and I see, and I can't say that I haven't avoided commitment up until this point in my life as far as a relationship goes. So, I've definitely, there's no. I'm kind of asking based on like things I see or people I know, rather than so you won't like hurt my feelings because this does not necessarily
No,
apply to my
that's
life
good,
right now.
'cause, and part of being a therapist is not being afraid to hurt feelings. So,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to get myself in trouble again, but we worry too much about how we feel. And that's one of the reasons so many people are so depressed and anxious is we're constantly asking, how do you feel? What are your feelings? Are you
my
okay?
goodness.
Rather than just deal with it.
Now that's a message that needs to be out there.
So how I feel can change from moment to moment.
You're
you know?
right.
So
you don't make long-term decisions based on it. Somebody
Right.
asked me the other day, so I'm going to hit the pause button on our conversation because this was such a powerful question, and it made me think. They asked me, is it possible to be too empathetic? And I said, and I was like, after I thought about it, I was like, yes, absolutely. Because if I'm so busy being empathetic and I think, oh, I need to know exactly what you're going through and how you feel and what you feel about it, I'm going to be making stuff up ultimately, and it's going to just boost my pride that I'm so empathetic instead of actually listening to your experience and trying to understand and then helping, walk the road with you. I'm so like, oh, I'm just so empathetic. Oh, I'm just, who cares? Big deal. Because chances are, if I said, oh, I know how you feel, this is how you feel, you'd be like, no, that's not how I feel. So it's like we puff ourselves up as a society like, oh, we're so empath, or, oh, I'm so empathetic, when chances are you're not even accurate in what you're feeling. Compassionate is definitely. So anyway, it made me think. One question made me think all
that's
week.
Great. No, that's fine. So a little self-disclaimer there as well. When I was in school doing my internship, we had to do videos of therapy sessions.
Okay.
So we had to get consent from client, and then we showed these to the class.
Oh, wow.
So I had to do 3 of these, and every one of them I had fairly high grades, with the exception of the empathy category. Apparently, I wasn't empathetic enough, which some of that's just I don't really react. So you could tell me about something, and I was taught not to have a shockable response is what we called it.
Yeah.
And because if you're going through something, and I'm like, oh no, that is so terrible. And, I'm devastated because of what you're going through. You're going to go, I can't tell you this because now I'm hurting you.
Isn't
and
that
so
a
I
good
was
thing?
taught not to do that.
And they said you should do that.
Correct.
What?
So
What?
even there, our training isn't where it should be.
I would tend to agree with how you were taught.
Right.
Yeah, because if I'm like, I did this, I don't want you going, oh my God.
You did what? Right? No, seriously, that's what we do though.
But if you're like, okay, then it's going to make me feel safe. Interesting. Okay.
Right. So trying to jump back on topic. So yes, life gets busy, 4 or 5 years in. I mean, I just made a fairly significant career change going from a therapist to the clinical director. So, time frame as far as how much I work jumped as well. So some of this is personal experience. Some of it's what I've seen. Some of it's what I've been taught. You have to become more intentional about it.
Okay.
And for some people, that is difficult. I'm more of a, hey, we have a couple hours tonight. Let's go do this thing.
Okay.
Where my wife is much more of a, we should plan this for next Friday. And actually, it would mean much more to her if I did that, just because of how our communication styles work. Like me, I'm ready to go. If we're going to do something, I'm like, hey, let's go do this thing right now. Where she's more of the planner. And so it means more, or it looks like I put more of an effort in. If I'm like, hey, Friday, we're going to go do this thing.
Which makes sense because it doesn't seem like a convenience thing.
Right.
For you, you're like, hey, let's take advantage of this moment. For her, she's like, what, just because it's convenient?
Right.
Interesting. Okay.
So some of it is being intentional with your time. So life is going to get busy. The kids are going to get busy. You're going to be busy. We're all going to have our things. So actually setting a specific time to do something. It doesn't have to be every week. It doesn't have to be every other week. Just knowing that you have that time. Whereas, hey, we're going to do this. Even if it's, hey, we're putting the kids to bed early tonight and we'll go do something just at the house.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to go somewhere to do something.
Got it.
It's, hey, the kids are busy. We're going to go outside and do this thing.
Right.
They'll be fine.
Okay. So this is another thing that I've seen, and I've kind of run into with, when my niece and nephews were a little bit younger. So there seems to be some parents who will be like, hey, you kids gotta wait. I gotta go do a hair appointment. I gotta do this. I gotta do this. I gotta do this. And then other people are like, if the kids need me, I won't do these things that are important to me or that I need to do because my kids need me. And both tend to think that they're right. The one could look very selfish and self-centered because you're like, your kids need you and you're off only taking care of yourself. And then you have the other ones who, 50 or, 30 years down the road, you could tell that they haven't taken care of themselves. Their hair's like they have all gray hair because of stress and stuff because they haven't taken that time. Do you see that that's a balance? Like, do you have anything to say about that?
Oh, I do. And so once again, I'm not going to answer the question the way you asked, just because it doesn't frame that way in my mind.
Yeah.
So part of it is that we're having kids older now than we used to, and we're having fewer of them.
Yeah. Okay.
And I know you said you didn't have kids and whatnot, so this isn't directed at you at all.
Yeah.
But women are waiting longer to have kids. I think the average age now is like 31 for a Caucasian woman. It's like 31 or 32 is when they have their first kid.
Wow.
At that point, that window's starting to close. It's not closed, but it's getting there. You have 10, 15 years in there at most.
Yeah. Right.
To actually have kids, and so you're having fewer of them, and so the investment now is higher.
Okay.
Because if I have 7 or 8 kids by the time I'm 30, which I know some people that do.
Right. Yeah.
The investment's not as high there. I have more of them.
Okay.
So, I can't put 100% of time into 8 kids. Where if I have 1 at 30 and, also at 30, typically people are wealthier. The number one indicator of wealth is age. Older people are usually wealthier. It's just how it works. Seriously, that is one of the things. Age is usually one of the things.
So there's hope for us all.
Right. Like, I'm in my 30s. I make much more than I do when I was 20.
Right.
It's just how that works. Typically with age, wages increase.
Right.
And so, I may have more money to spend on that kid than I would have if I were 20. If I have a kid at 20 versus 30, I have quite a bit more funds to spill into that kid.
Right.
And so the kid ends up being priority at that point, where at 20, I'm still trying to figure things out.
Right.
I might not have a stable career yet. I might still be in school.
Yeah.
I don't really have the resources. And so what I spend with the kid is time rather than dumping resources into the kid. Which
Got it.
Some people do. So there is a balance to it, like you're talking about, but a lot of times I think a lot of the ones that are too worried about leaving their kid behind or going and taking care of themselves, it's because this is the one chance I have. If I mess up with this one kid, I won't be able to do anything differently next time. Or if I have 3 or 4 or 5, that changes that a little bit. Or I've got to get it right at least once. That sounds brutal, and I don't mean for it to.
Interesting. It's interesting, though, the patterns in people and the patterns that you could see in people who never met each other, don't know each other, but just that natural human reaction. That's interesting.
It's across the board.
Right.
It tends to vary by culture, but across the board, it's roughly you see the same things.
Okay. So let's talk about a buzzword. I guess a couple years ago it was a big buzzword, but red flags in dating, regardless of age, because there's a lot of people of all ages out there, single, dating, looking, people who've been married, who've gone through a divorce, or maybe people who say, I'll never get married again, but they're looking for companionship, or people actively looking for marriage. So what are some of the major red flags that you're seeing in today's culture? See, I love these loaded questions. And guys, I didn't prepare him at all.
No.
I just
No. My preparation was I kind of want to talk about relationships and family. That was my preparation 2 days ago. No, it's good. So red flags. Oh man. So one that most people have probably heard is how do they treat their mother or their sister?
Is that true?
It seems to be true.
Okay.
Of course, once again, that's somewhat nuanced because
Yeah.
now we have broken homes.
Right.
The majority of kids nowadays are raised by grandparents instead of their actual parent.
Wow.
Most of them are raised in single parent homes as well. And so some of that is becoming a little more nuanced than it would be.
Okay.
Because personal disclosure, I was raised by my grandparents instead of my parents.
Okay.
And so my relationship with my mother looks more like it is with my sister than my mother because I was raised by her parents.
Wow.
So she's an older sister to me.
Yeah.
And that's really how our relationship tends to work out is she's my sister.
Okay.
So if you saw my relationship or interactions with my mom sometimes, they're not always pleasant.
Right.
They're not what they should be.
Right.
I understand that and I'm working on it. But at the same time, my whole life she's been my sister.
Right.
Right. And so
Interesting.
if you were to see that, it's, he hates his mom. no, I'm just annoyed with my sister.
Right. Right. That's interesting though, like how somebody is raised that
Right.
factors into it. So I've also heard that it's how they treat elderly people and kids or anybody who can't give them back something.
Right.
So I've heard that said as well.
Right.
You know, how do you treat somebody who you don't want anything from,
Right.
you know,
Or can't get anything from.
or can't get anything from, right?
Because if I'm doing something for you, just expecting you to return a favor for
Exactly.
me,
Yeah.
there's really nothing good that comes of that.
Right,
Because
right,
I'm
right.
not doing it just to do it.
Right.
If I'm
Like you could
taking
sweet
tallies,
talk, a grandma for money.
Right.
So even you could say, like senior citizens, but you might still want something from them.
Right.
But somebody who you just, so I've noticed that, like the character issue. What about narcissism? That seems to be a
Okay,
big
that's
thing
a
right
big
now.
one. So a lot of times I'm seeing narcissists everywhere, or at least hearing about narcissists everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing them everywhere, and a lot of that is a poor description of what a narcissist is.
Okay.
And so people think that just because I think highly of myself, I might be a narcissist, or maybe I'm just confident.
Yeah.
With the narcissist, a lot of times I'm making myself look good by putting you down.
Oh.
Or I'm
okay.
not taking accountability for anything I do incorrectly and it's all your fault. Or it's all somebody else's fault.
Right.
There's just no accountability there when it comes to a narcissist.
Got it.
And usually you see those really I'm going to get myself in trouble again, but in the business world, the extremely successful ones are usually narcissists. Because they go into that and it's exactly what you're talking about. What can I get out of this?
Got it.
Even if I walk into a store or, I walk into cast iron, I buy everybody in here something.
Yeah.
It's for me. Everybody's going to look at me and
like
look what I did.
Interesting.
It's not me trying to be nice to everybody.
And I
it's
suppose
to
that
bring it back towards
I suppose that would play well in knowing what business deals you want, being confident in your decisions. So it's just the immature, I guess,
It's a 2-year-old.
right. So it's there's a gift and there's a quality of saying, "Hey, I know what I and I'm regardless of what anybody says, I'm going to do it." And a lot of times it pays off. And we call that tenacity and we call that, not perseverance. But then when it takes like a selfish or immature part, would that be accurate or
It's more taking the, how do I put this?
or is it like
it's a
considered
self-serving role. And
okay, got it.
It's more, I don't care what happens to you as long as I get elevated.
Got it.
So no
Okay.
matter what the consequences are for you, as
Okay.
long as I look good or I get the position, it's okay.
Now what about gaslighting? Is that connected?
I've met people that aren't narcissists that gaslight.
Okay.
So gaslighting, that's one of the newer buzzwords as well. The
Right.
last couple of years, that one popped
Probably
up.
how I know it.
Right. That popped up the last couple
Because of that
years.
movie a long time ago. It was called, okay. So can you explain to people who don't know what gaslighting is? And it seems almost sometimes normal for people.
Right. So essentially, it's me convincing you that something that happened didn't happen.
Okay.
So I'll give you a funny story just to give you an example.
Yeah.
And it's funny, but my wife did it to me.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I have the tendency to drop things on the counter when I get home.
Okay.
She'll randomly move them. And so I go back to the counter to grab it. I'm like, am I losing my mind? Because I know I put my phone there. Or
Got it.
my keys
Okay.
were there. Something was there.
Right.
And so I'll run around the house trying to find this thing. Like, I know I dropped it there when I came in, but maybe I didn't.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so that's at a funny level, but you can
Yeah.
do that with severe things.
Okay.
Like, you're a stupid person. I hate you. And then later, I never said that. What are you talking about?
Oh, ooh, that would
Right.
be horrible.
Or I never did that thing. Or why did you do this? And I didn't do that. What are
And
you
it makes the
talking about?
victim feel
You start wondering, did he actually
Wow.
do it? Did they not do it? I don't know. Right. And so
Wow.
you're starting to basically make the person doubt their thoughts.
and it's like manipulative.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So why would somebody do that?
It's a control factor.
Oh, it's about control.
Because if you don't know or you're unsure of your thoughts, who are you going to go to? usually it's the person you're closest to.
Right.
So a lot of times that's whoever you're in a relationship with. You have parents that do
Yeah.
this. Some, some parents that probably shouldn't be parents, but we won't get into
Right.
that.
Right,
That'll
right,
get me in
right.
trouble for sure. But
So it's people who like to feel control over other people. Like,
right.
wow.
Yeah, it's a manipulation thing.
Oh,
Or it could
that's
just be
horrible.
to run your reputation down. So you run around saying, I did this thing. And I'm like, there's no evidence of that. I didn't do it. What are you talking about?
Wow.
So
So that's a major red flag. If you see that run
Absolutely.
before, in a relationship.
Absolutely.
Have you ever seen anybody gaslight or do stuff, manipulative things like that don't realize they're doing it to the people they love? Or do they usually kind of know?
Usually if it's gaslighting, it's pretty intentional.
It's intentional. Okay.
Because it happens frequently. If you don't know you're doing it,
Yeah.
you won't continue to do it.
Got it.
You know,
Got it.
if it's more of an accidental thing, like I don't remember that, or I don't know
Yeah.
what you're talking about, it's not frequent.
Okay.
You know, so that's one of the things. So yes, gaslighting it can be pretty detrimental because you just lose your self-confidence and you start wondering
man,
whether
that's-
you're actually mentally stable or not.
That's horrible.
Right.
I feel like society does that sometimes to people.
Absolutely. I mean, the media does it constantly.
That's okay. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's talk one more red flag, and then I have a question about conflict and conflict resolution because some people say, don't run from conflict. You got to talk it out. And other times people are like, no, it's only going to get worse. Like so. But let's talk one more red flag. Well, you got another red flag?
Another red flag. Oh. If you had asked me yesterday, yeah. But since you asked me while I'm right here, I got nothing.
Okay. What about?
Can't think
let
of
me
one off the
think.
top
Let me
of my
think.
head.
What
I
would be
apologize.
a big red flag if I were dating?
Well, if whoever it is doesn't have any goals or plans,
Yeah,
if they
that's
don't know where they're
definitely
going with
not.
their life,
Yeah.
Or frankly, if they make poor financial decisions,
Ooh,
if you're
that would be-
20 years old and then $40,000 of debt,
Right,
you
that's-
probably don't want to be with that person. That
Right.
sounds terrible, but
Yeah.
if I'm 20 years old and I'm
Yeah.
that far in debt, I make really bad decisions.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I guess that would go back to like an unwillingness to learn. I feel like that would probably be a big red flag for me if I felt like this person just didn't have any kind of desire to learn new things or learn new ways or to change anything that's not working. I feel so. Yeah, that might be
And
okay.
It's not
okay.
really a red flag,
Yeah.
but look at their 3 or 4 closest friends, and they're going to be the average of their friends.
Oh.
So
And the advice they get.
right.
Oh,
So,
shoot. Yeah,
'cause
you're
they're
right.
going to be the average of their friend group.
Yeah.
So whoever they spend the most time with, they're the average of those people.
Wow.
So make sure that's somebody you want to be with.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Okay, let's talk about conflict. So I know that there's different conflict resolution styles and there's attachment styles and I love all this. I love this stuff. So
This is the fun part. For me.
okay. So real quick, for those of you who don't know attachment styles, fascinating. There's 4 major attachment styles, and correct me if I'm wrong or whatever. I'm just kind of providing a backdrop. Okay. There's the fearful, which is I don't want to engage because I'm afraid you'll leave me if something goes wrong. So I run from conflict. Fearful is no, I'm going to latch on, and then avoidant, and then fearful, avoidant, and then there's normal or healthy, which is all in how we were raised as children. Okay, so with that said, sometimes I hear therapists and they talk, and it's almost unrealistic in how you should deal with conflict. I'm going to sit here and I hear what you're saying, and I really respect what you're saying, and I'm thankful that you're saying it to me, even though it's hurtful. But I just want to apologize and let you know that I hear you. I'm like, who does that? And if somebody did that to me, I'd be like, what are you condescending?
Yeah, I don't do that.
But right. And so it's so unrealistic. And I'm like, ugh, what is that? And then there's other times where they're like, okay, well, you walk away and then you come back and talk about it. Other times people sit around the table and talk about it. And other people are like, no, we need to talk about it right now or else you're avoiding it. Right. So talk to us about conflict and kind of some.
Once again, loaded question, right? So
Totally.
Parts of it are correct and parts of it are incorrect.
Okay.
And parts of it depend on the situation.
Okay.
So if we come in, me and you are fighting.
Yeah.
We're both escalated. We're screaming at each other.
Okay.
we're not getting anything out of that conversation.
Right.
It's better to walk away and re-engage later
Okay.
in that case, because once you escalate to the point where you're screaming or yelling at each other,
Yeah.
you're not going to be listening to each other.
Got it.
You're just screaming to scream at that point.
Okay.
So there's no point in engaging at that when
Got
that
it.
happens. So
Now, is it good to
de-escalation.
is it good to be is it good to have that, like, okay, if we've been arguing for 10 minutes and not getting anywhere, it's like a pre-agreement, like that we just walk away, or in the heat of the moment, who says, let's just talk about this later? Like,
Right.
how's that work?
So some of that's things you need to discuss ahead of time as
Okay.
well. Because if we're in the middle of a fight, so I prefer direct conflict right now.
Okay.
If it's me, I want to get it over with.
Got
That's
it.
me.
Okay.
You might not be that way. You might
Okay.
need a minute to think about it.
Okay.
And so we need to discuss that ahead of time.
Got it.
This is the premarital stuff, right?
Oh,
so
true. Okay.
we're talking about this in therapy, right?
Got
When
it.
am I going, or how are we going to resolve conflicts when we have them?
Yeah.
What's that going to look like? Because for me, it might look completely different than it does for you. Because I
Right.
know for me, I'll have a conversation. Yeah, I'll have a conversation. I think we're good to go, and my wife may not think we're done with it yet. And I'm like, what? We talked about it the other night. I thought we were good.
Got it.
But apparently we never actually resolved it.
Right.
Right. I didn't know that. But
Right. Okay.
and so she's like, we didn't finish what we talked about last night. So what do we do? And I'm like,
Which is interesting, right? Along that lines, there's somebody, like I have three sisters. And so we all have different styles when it comes to arguing. And of course you argue with your sisters.
absolutely.
But one of them, she needs to discuss things until it's finished, even if it's like later. So my tendency would be like, oh, are we talking about this again? Right. And so I can't imagine like being in a long-term relationship where you have completely different styles. So is it, if you're in a relationship with somebody and you're just so completely opposite when it comes to that, is it the only way is just through understanding and saying love has to win out? Like, is that pretty much it? Because there's no real right way, or
So most of the times in long-term relationships, what I found is you end up with one of each communication style or conflict style.
Oh, no.
So you really do. And some of
Okay.
that, like for instance, you usually don't meet a couple where both of them are talkers. Right?
Oh, interesting.
You usually don't.
Okay.
I mean, I might be wrong there,
No,
but
that's
it
interesting.
seems that way when I've met people that usually one spouse talks more than the other, or they're the life of the party and the other one's there. Every now and then you get that power couple where they're both
Right. Yeah,
awesome,
yeah,
but
yeah.
typically it's one or the other.
Interesting.
And so the way I was taught and the way I explain it to people is you have what we call turtlers and hurdlers
Okay.
when it comes to conflict. So the turtler, you yell at me, I'm going to go into my shell. I don't want to talk about this. I'm just going to shrink away from it.
Okay.
And you're trying to get through the conflict now. You're hurdling towards it. You're like, we need to talk about this. I need to resolve it. Sounds like your sister.
Okay.
I'm going to talk.
Okay. Yes.
All right. And then with communication types as well, you have audible processors. And so
Okay.
some people actually think while they're talking. And so for those of us that think inside of our heads and then speak, an audible processor is very annoying because you're going to tell me all of the thoughts that I would normally filter out before I tell you.
Oh,
Right. And so
okay.
you're sitting there, and so your sister may be this way. I don't know because I've never met her.
Right.
But she's telling you absolutely every detail. Some of it, you're like, how could you say that? And it's things we would normally filter out, but she's actually thinking about it while she's talking.
Got it. Okay.
And so in our minds, like, that's so rude. How could you say that? I can't believe that. That's terrible. And it's usually really long and drawn out.
Oh my
And you're
goodness.
like, why are you telling me
Right.
every detail of everything you did today and how you're going to
I
do
feel
it?
so blessed that
Right.
we've kind of outgrown, but there was a period of time, and if you were talking to her, she probably would be just as frustrated at my style. But yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
just like it takes forever, and I'm like, it just was 5 minutes. It was a misunderstanding,
Mm-hmm.
but it needs to be talked about and rehashed. And I'm like, oh,
Right. And so some of that's finding a compromise.
Yeah.
Right? So you can't always get your way and they can't always get their
Right.
way. So for me, I'm more of a let's get to the point and get it over with.
yeah,
My wife likes to tell the story. And she'll catch it on occasion where she's talking and I'm just She's like, did I lose you? Yeah.
Oh, she's
Yeah, it happens because she's telling me the whole
she's so
story, and I'm
sweet.
like, get to the
Right.
point, right? And so I kind of space. It sounds terrible, but
Yeah,
and it's just
yeah.
overloading me with detail I don't need. So I'm like, okay, what about this?
Got it.
Because you're like, my day at work was terrible. I was driving there, and I'm
Yeah.
like, you said your day at work was terrible, right? Instantly, when you tell me your day at work was terrible, and you start
Interesting.
telling me about the drive there, I'm like,
Oh,
I'm already
really?
at work. What
That's
you
crazy.
know?
So, okay,
So
so that leads me to people say that men's brains, or I've heard an analogy, men's brains are like waffles, where everything's compartmentalized. If you're at work, I'm at work. And if it's this, and here's my responsibilities. And sometimes those don't make a connection.
no, they don't make a connection.
Where,
Ever. They're not allowed to.
okay,
No.
so then, because if they did, then the emotions of this would overtake these responsibilities, and men would be not able to like provide for their families and stuff because they'd be led by. And when you see an occasional guy who's led by his emotions or his lusts or his
They're
desires for
dangerous.
women, yeah, they're dangerous and they're not good family. They're not good for their family, society, their whatever. But women, they said, is a little bit more along the lines of like,
It's all emotionally driven. It's all attached
well,
to each other.
right.
you know?
They said, my mom hated this analogy, but they said it's like a plate of spaghetti where one end of the noodle is, the other end might be interlooped with 5 other noodles, and on the other side of the plate. So we are a little bit able to say, oh, we were at work and we felt this, and my kids are at the daycare, and this and da da da, and it all interacts. So would that
That's
seem?
where some of that plays in, and we can't keep up. You're going through the loops,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, A to B. How do we get there? And so a lot of that is true.
Interesting.
And my wife got to discover that with me when we first really got married, where I'm sitting there like this, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, nothing. What you thinking about? Nothing. You have to be thinking about something. I'm like, no, not at all. not at all.
You're in the waffle. You're in the
Right.
like category of nothing.
Correct.
Wow.
And so it seems guys can do that better than,
Yeah,
than girls
right.
can or women can. And I know I'm not supposed to say that
I
because
could be-
there's absolutely no differences between the genders anymore. So I'm
Oh,
not
man,
allowed to
that's
say
crazy.
that.
But yet, people, it's so
yes.
funny. The same people who say that, on a side note, are the ones trying so desperately to stand out from each other.
Right.
So whether it's a hair or piercings or personality or clothing style, everybody wants to stand out. But then at the same time, it's like, oh no, we're all the same.
Right.
There's no difference. You're not allowed to say that. So it's a very interesting juxtaposition right
But
now.
at the same time, say you had a blue mohawk and I comment on your blue mohawk, you'll be like, why are you talking about it?
Really?
Even though you're standing out, right?
Right. Okay.
You're like,
no,
why did you acknowledge that?
Oh,
So
see.
now
No.
you're offended that I'm paying attention to it, even though you want to be noticed.
Yeah. Isn't
And
that
that
something?
happens as well.
It's
But
crazy.
That's off topic. So
Off topic, yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah.
But
No, but
it
I'm
does
thinking
happen.
about. I am thinking about getting a blue mohawk. So
Cool.
No,
I want pictures when it happens. But,
Okay. So, oh man, so many different things. Let's talk one more. Let's see. Oh man,
We have a
we've
little
been doing
bit of
good.
time,
We got a
right?
little bit, and then we got to ask you our final question about some of your favorite places in the area. But
Oh, now you're gonna get me in
let's.
trouble.
Okay, I have a couple different, things. Okay, love languages.
Okay.
Do you see that those are accurate? Can you describe real quick
100%.
what they are and kind of like the role that you've seen them play?
Okay. I don't know if I can do it real quick.
Okay.
But I will try, and I'm gonna forget one.
Okay.
So there's quality time.
Yeah.
Is a big one, and I'll explain what they are in
Okay.
a minute. There's quality time. There's physical touch, acts of service, gifts, whether giving or receiving, and then the other one I always
Words of
forget, words of
affirmation.
affirmation. And what I found is that most people have 2 that score high. Like if I were to give you a test, you'd
Okay.
have 2 that were toward the top, and the other
Okay.
3 would just they might have a couple points in them.
Okay.
But usually you have a primary and a secondary that's not too far behind. Where you run into conflict with those and how they apply is that typically I will show you affection the way I want to be shown affection. So my love languages are how I will express love.
Okay.
And that may not be the way you express love. And so I'm doing these things that I think are loving or caring, and you're like, he doesn't care about me at all. He's not doing anything. You know, he's not helping me at all. So quality time, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's spending time with each other.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's physical touch. That one's pretty obvious as well, right? Acts of service. I'm doing things for you. You know, and that could look like, you know, I made this project, or I did this project for you. I cleaned the house. I did the dishes. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
wives love that. You know, it's like, hey,
Right.
I did
Of
the
course.
dishes. And,
Yeah.
you know, they're like, yes, that is awesome. Yeah. You know, and then words of affirmation, you know, telling somebody how great they are, how much you
Yeah.
care about them, stuff like that. It's all meaningful.
Nice.
And then the gift giving's pretty obvious as well. I
Right.
like giving you things, whether it's very meaningful or meaningless. Like I had a coworker. She was older than my grandmother, but she was awesome. Anytime she went anywhere, she'd bring something back. It didn't matter what it was. I pretty sure I have a sock or a drawer full of Christmas socks from her. You know,
Oh, that's so
just because
sweet.
that's what she did. She'd give Christmas socks
how
every
she showed
Christmas.
love.
Yeah. And if you
As-
went somewhere and didn't bring a gift back, she was
Yeah.
devastated. 'Cause
Really?
you went there, you didn't think of me, you know, and because that was her thing.
That
That's
was
how she
how-
showed you. You know, you could sit down with her and show her pictures and spend time with her and talk to her about it. But
Wow.
I didn't bring her some souvenir from the place. And so she would be offended, like, oh, you don't actually care. You know, so it's
Interesting.
interesting how that works.
Ooh, I just got like a jolt in the heart because I do have somebody who always gets me, you know, a family member who always gets souvenirs and stuff. And I guess I just don't even think about
Right.
it anymore. Wow. Yeah.
It's the
So
same.
I
My
need to do that.
mother-in-law's that way. She'll
Yeah.
get me a ton of pointless stuff, and I'm like, "Why are you buying me these things?"
To let you know she was thinking about you while
Right.
she was there.
Right. Like
That
one
is
day
so
a
sweet.
package showed up, and it was some pens and a sign for my office, and I'm like, "Who sent this?"
That
Like, there
is
was no
so
name on it or anything. Like, where did this come from?
That is adorable. That's
but-
so cute.
That's the thing with the love languages, though. So, say it's quality time, physical touch, whatever. If now I'm withholding that from you, that's just as bad if I'm doing something else. Right. So, like the
Wow.
gifts, or if I'm not spending time with you.
Okay, so the withholding of your love language is just as bad as saying, "Hey, I don't care about you. I don't love you."
Because
Wow.
in their minds, you're not showing them that you do.
Wow.
You know, you're not doing the things they care about.
Okay.
And so, like with somebody who words of affirmation is very important.
Yeah.
If I tell you how stupid and degrade you,
Oh,
you
man.
know, if I do
Yeah.
that,
It's
that-
even
that's
more
worse,
hurtful
right?
than
Because it
okay.
means more to you,
Wow.
right? Because
Ooh.
if I need to be told that you care, and I'm telling you I don't care, you know,
Yeah.
that's that double
Definitely.
that double-edged sword. It goes both
Interesting.
ways.
Okay.
So if mine is physical touch, and you're like, get away from me, I don't want you near me.
It's even
like,
more hurtful
right.
than it would be if it wasn't your
Right.
love language.
Right.
Wow.
So and then there are some commonalities. Like men, usually it is physical touch and words of affirmation.
Okay.
We like to be respected.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm
I
stereotyping.
love
so,
I love
you
I
know.
don't call it necessarily stereotyping, but it's patterns and I
Right.
love patterns.
Right,
Any
so-
scientist can see a pattern.
Yeah, usually they're somewhat interchangeable.
Okay.
Acts of service may be in there as far as how they like to show it or
Okay.
show that they care. You know, they might like to do things for their wife,
Interesting.
stuff
Yeah,
like that.
and for their kids, changing the oil and stuff. But
So-
they probably, that's interesting.
Usually it's touch, especially when you're younger. Usually it's touch and words of
Okay.
affirmation. I need
Generally,
to know
for
I'm doing
women,
well.
you think what is a pattern? Acts of
quality-
service and quality time.
Quality time and probably acts of service.
Interesting.
Some have touch, but honestly,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
usually
yeah.
more of a male characteristic.
Right. Or gifts or something. More like the receiving.
Or
Receiving.
even the giving. You know, acts
Yeah.
of service. You know, some people like doing things for people. You know, I invite you over, I cook you a meal. That's an act of service.
Oh, right.
You know, it's, hey, come over and let's do this thing.
Okay, and a gift. That's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like two in one. Yeah, interesting. So if you guys want to find out more about the five love languages, the book was what? The five love
It's
languages
the five love
by
languages. I can't remember who wrote it. It's
Gary
an old
Chapman.
book.
Gary Chapman.
Yes.
Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman. So the last question before we ask your favorite places
Right.
is a couple, maybe a book or a couple books that you would recommend for people in relationships or maybe having trouble or just wanting to make sure that their relationship is solid.
I wasn't prepared for that one.
See, that's Youngstown Click Be Connected. It's not scripted.
I was not prepared for that one. So one I recommend, and it is written from a Christian perspective.
Okay.
But, you know, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
You know, it still applies whether you believe or not.
Yeah.
It's called Fierce Marriage I can't
Oh,
remember the name of the authors, but it's a husband and wife that wrote the book together.
really? Okay.
And actually,
Fierce Marriage.
correct.
Okay, that
I
sounds
can't
good.
think of the author off the top of my head.
Okay.
And then that's really the main one that I recommend to
Have you ever
people.
heard of Jimmy Evans?
Mhm.
Jimmy Evans? I've heard a few of his things on
Right,
relationships as well. He's fascinating. I
right,
haven't read any of his books, so I don't even know if he
right.
has books, to be
Usually,
honest.
when it comes to this sort of thing, usually I recommend people find somebody who has a successful relationship and
Yeah.
talk to them. How'd you
Okay.
do it? They'll talk to you. You
Yeah,
know,
that's good.
they're willing to
Your
talk
own
to you.
market research.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
Don't talk to the
community.
person that's been divorced 8 times and,
Right.
they're working on the ninth. Talk to the
Right.
person who's been married 40 years. What'd you do? How'd you get through it? How'd you resolve conflict?
Right.
If they've been married 40 years, they've gone through something.
Oh
Can
my
guarantee
goodness.
it.
Well, that's, I'll never
But yeah.
forget. I'll never forget seeing this couple. They had grown kids. The kids were like right out of college and they were doing good. And the guy was a wildlife photographer and he loved it. And they just seemed like a great, like I was like perfect, picture of an established, successful couple. And they had fun together. And one day I heard them talking to an older couple. And they said, oh man, we remember being young and we had young kids and we thought we were failing. We thought we were the worst parents. And apparently their church had a young parents group. And so they like went dragging into this group and this older couple were the ones to kind of like help them kind of see them through some of those tough times. And so this couple who I was like, wow, they got it together, were telling about these younger days that they just felt so overwhelmed and like they were just failing and had all these things, but yet they had gotten that from this older couple. And I thought, oh my goodness, what if they didn't have that? Would their outcome or what I'm looking at them seeing be totally different? If they
Right.
didn't have that community and that conversation with somebody who else had made it a little bit
Right.
further, that's powerful.
Right. And,
That is powerful.
not to regress at all, but that goes back to the number of broken marriages and what family dynamics look like now.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people starting families don't have a family to look to,
Yeah.
and so they don't have that mentor like, hey, how did grandma and grandpa do it?
Right.
Grandma and grandpa may be divorced at this point. It's something like
Yeah.
the first marriage is 50% ends in divorce, the second 73, and then it goes up from there.
See, I
These
think
are
that's
old
probably,
statistics,
and that
but
probably has to do with some of my relationship version because my grandma and my grandpa were divorced. My mom and my dad. A lot of the people growing up around me were divorced, and I'm not. I would never. I don't feel like I'm inferior or that people from divorced families are inferior. So that's never something I'd say. But there is a desire to say, if I do make that decision, I want it to be different. I don't want it to follow that pattern. But knowing the statistics and knowing that if you don't have a successful role model in that area, but all those people I mentioned love me and I knew I was loved, but they weren't able to be successful in that particular area. So
Right.
yeah.
And some of that goes to our culture in general. If we don't have instant success or if we're challenged at all, we move on to the next thing.
Ooh.
And so we do that in relationships too.
Yeah.
We shouldn't do that. And some of that comes, and really it comes from starting to remove consequences. So we never learn how to get through something. That's where I'm
Oh,
a
that's
big
deep.
fan of school sports.
Yeah.
As long as somebody wins and somebody loses.
Okay.
And frankly, it's more important if you lose
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
then you learn, oh, I can lose and I can still play.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not only can I still play, but I can come back and win next time.
Yeah, that's
You know?
true. Right, right. And you're not a loser. Your
Right.
identity isn't stamped. I had puppies and I watched, this is so funny because I watched them learn how to play again. And then one would yelp. And so they'd let go. They bit the ear too much or, you know what I'm saying? And I watched them play. And at first I was like, don't, trying to stop them. And then I realized, or maybe I read somewhere, that's how they learn how hard their bite is. That's how they learn how to be, is by that they're learning, what's too much and what hurts the other puppy or whatever. And it's fascinating because I literally had that thought. I was like, kids don't wrestle anymore. Kids don't just roughhouse anymore because it's, stop it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So they don't know what it's like to get kicked in their ribs by accident
Right.
because because nobody wants to see their kid go through pain, but that's how they learn, a little bit of that,
Yeah, I warned my kid twice, and if it's not going to kill him, okay, that's his choice. So
Wow.
he got dropped off with the babysitter this morning, has a Band-Aid across his eye. He was messing with the dog. She headbutted him, and he has a nice cut right above his eye. Yeah,
Aw.
he's all sorts of cut and banged up
Yeah.
and bruised and scraped, and like he'll be fine.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's fine.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh,
and that's important to do. Let them
yeah.
know that okay, there are limits. I got
Absolutely.
hurt, but I'm okay.
Absolutely.
And
There's a whole book about my sister told it to me because I used to roughhouse with all my nephews, and they'd all three be piled on me, and I'd be wrestling. And so she actually stumbled across a book about the importance of roughhousing and how it creates bonds and stuff that would not be there otherwise. When you play, when you physically like play chase or carry, you know what I'm saying? It's interesting. So, if you guys are listening to this and you have young children, I encourage you to take the time to like, play wrestle with them or, do the things obviously in a safe way, but like, it's important bonding experience.
it's harder to hurt a toddler than you think it is.
Oh,
They're little suicide
they're
machines.
oh,
They are constantly trying to die. They'll be okay. Yeah, it sounds
That's
terrible,
what
but they really are.
oh, they're so cute. They have no fear.
None.
Oh, so cute.
None. But it's great.
Okay, so to our final, well, actually, is there anything else that you would like to add? We didn't even touch real quick. I mean, maybe 60 seconds. Tell us about Family Recovery Center. Is that what you do?
Yeah, Family
That's right.
Recovery Center. So we are a local agency. We have 2 locations. We're located in Lisbon and in Steubenville, Ohio.
Okay.
We have a women's residential facility as well.
Really?
We do. We've been around, 51 years now. So
Wow.
it was at the forefront when it started, for sure.
Okay.
It actually started here in Salem and then ended up moving to Lisbon. I just found that out last week.
Okay.
But we provide the full spectrum of mental health and substance abuse counseling.
Got it.
If anything, we're known for our substance abuse or recovery services,
Okay.
but we're working on changing that where people know we do mental health services as well.
Okay.
And we're known as the recovery place, but we do all of it. It's Family Recovery Center. We work
Absolutely.
with kids, we work with adults, we work with everything.
I love it. And it's multifaceted recovery,
Right.
not just a.
Right. And then we have a pretty big prevention program that we've started as well.
Really?
We
I've
have
never heard about
yeah.
prevention programs and that.
Yeah. So we have an education side that consists of 10 to 15 people, and all they do is go into schools. So we're trying to stop the problems
That
before it
is
even starts.
wonderful.
Right. So
Finally.
yeah. So we're trying to stop it before it even starts.
Wow.
And some of that may be stopping the kids from getting expelled from school or suspended due to getting caught with vapes or cigarettes or whatever.
Okay.
So we've set it up with most schools where, they work with one of our people. It's all grant funded. So, there's no charge to the students or the schools, anything like that, if something comes up.
Yeah.
And then we have our harm reduction services, and that's a mixed bag depending on who you ask, because some people are like, oh, they need the consequences. And at the same time, I'm like, well, I can't help them if they're dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we have one of our providers started the Project Dawn in this area, which is a service to get Narcan kits in the hands of people to try to stop overdoses.
Okay.
We attempted to get a needle exchange program started up, and we were shot down by the county.
What is a needle exchange program?
So a needle exchange program, so say you are an IV drug user, you're using needles.
Okay.
A proper needle exchange programs will look like you use 5 needles, you bring those 5 needles in, I give you 5 new needles.
Oh,
Right.
oh.
So
Oh, my.
the reason for that, though, is one, you're actually coming to a facility where you have the potential to get services. Because if you're actually showing up at my facility going, hey, I need new needles, you have a problem. So that's part of it. The other part is you're not dropping them on the side of the road in a back alley. You're not dropping them in a park somewhere because I'm requiring you to bring them in to get a new one. And so it stops them from being in parks. So I'll give you an example. When I lived right outside Seattle, we would literally walk the football field before a game to make sure there were no needles on the field.
What?
Yeah. It looked like we were walking down an aircraft carrier, making sure there was nothing on the deck. because none of us wanted to get stabbed by a dirty needle. So we would do that before every game.
What?
Yeah.
Is that big of a problem in Seattle? Has it been? It's not that big of a problem here, or
In the cities, it's
Thankfully.
probably close. In the bigger cities, it's probably close.
wow?
Yeah, I think it was 2018 or 2019. Now we're way off of where I thought I was going to go.
Yeah.
But Ohio was number one in the country for the number of overdoses just 4 or 5 years ago.
Man,
And
wow.
and we're not
That's
that big of a
interesting.
state.
Huh?
So
Yeah,
so we do all of that. So
and just try to
we're
find
trying
creative ways to
right.
make sure that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, that definitely. I have mixed feelings about
Right.
that particular program, but
Myself as well. At
Yeah.
the same time, I'm like, well, I don't want my kid to go to a park and under the jungle gym, there's needles there because that was where they injected that night. Where they go, hey, if I take this in, I can get a new one. And then it potentially stops the spread of hepatitis C and all of that as well.
oh my
Or
goodness.
HIV, whichever.
Yeah.
Because, that's one of the major ways it's spread is intravenously or sexually. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a good. The preventative. Man, we could just double this.
Yes.
But, in as far as since you're dealing with prevention, if you had a target, the a top, or in your opinion the top, would it be peer pressure or would it be trauma that gets people to take that first step down the road of addiction or drug? I'm not even going to say addiction because nobody thinks they're going down the road of addiction.
Right.
Drug use.
Oh, man. So I'm personally not a huge fan of the peer pressure idea.
Okay.
I mean, it does exist, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, but at the same time, there's something going on where you wake up and go, I want to feel different than what I do. There's something there that makes you want to do that.
Okay.
Or feel the need to do that.
So you don't think people are just picking it up, using it for the first time at a party or at school or because all their friends are doing it? I know that's
Yeah.
probably why they're doing vapes is
Right.
because their friends
They're
are doing
seeing
it. It's
it.
a thing.
Or actually, a lot of times it's the parents buying it for them because they think it's safer, which we don't know that. So sounds terrible, but it really is.
Man.
Oh, man.
So
I think a big part of the issue is we've normalized it as a culture.
drug use.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you really saw this, and I keep jumping back to Seattle now, but Washington State was the first state to legalize marijuana for recreational use.
Okay.
Within 4 years, crime rates had tripled.
What?
Overall crime rates had tripled. And, I
that's
know
not good
causation,
news.
correlation.
Ohio, this is not good news.
I know. Causation versus correlation, all of that, it might not be because of that.
Right.
But it's
But if
just
they
ironic.
if they made a big change in the car industry
Right.
and then all of a sudden traffic accidents tripled, people would
Right.
be making that correlation
Right.
regardless. Yeah.
Right. And then they've removed the consequences. They stopped prosecuting, which, frankly, some of that's happening too. So in Seattle, for example, at least as of last year, 5 grams of any substance was considered user quantity. And so drug dealers just kept 5 grams on them. And so they would sell them, and it's considered user quantity. They wouldn't get arrested for it, and they would just, yeah. Or if they did get arrested, they'd be released the same
Who's
day.
making the laws? A bunch of drug addicts? My goodness.
I won't get into that one today.
Oh,
that,
man.
that turns into a political discussion. Then I get in trouble.
Man. You're right. Okay, and it's probably better for me too because
Right.
I'd say something that popped into my mind.
Oh,
okay, wow. Okay, so let's back on to thank you.
Right.
Thank you so
Of
much
course.
for
Of
taking
course.
the time, and
No,
thank you.
it's a
I know
privilege.
so much of this you just allowed me to pick your brain and kind of take you out of that. Necessarily your professional therapist role and just talk to you one-on-one. So thank you. And I appreciate
course.
that. And guys, I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you maybe identified with some of it and kind of learned something that could help you in your relationships in the future. Definitely. Yeah, I definitely, Youngstown Click is all about being connected, and through connection, making our quality of life better and moving forward and more educated and just becoming the leaders instead of one of the worst counties in Ohio and the worst the worst states in the union. We want to become the best and most prosperous and the most economically diverse and connected. And so this is a part of that. So guys, thank you for listening. I know that this one was a little bit long. Now we're about to ask our last, no, it's not your fault. It's totally my fault. We're about to ask our last and final question. So Anthony, 3 of your favorite, now you live out this way in Salem.
I do.
But I know you travel and drive a lot. So 3 either like hidden gems, like hidden spots that you like to stop and you're like, hey, you should check this place out, even if it's not necessarily your favorite, or 3 of your favorite places. Just 3 places that you would tell people, hey, you should check this place out.
Are we talking Ohio in general or?
Anywhere between Cleveland and Pittsburgh.
Okay. So one of the hidden gems that nobody knows about we're sitting in. And
Good call. Okay. Yeah.
No, seriously, a lot of people, even in Salem, have no idea.
Even it's Salem?
Yeah, there's 11,000 people here. I can guarantee they haven't had 11,000 people in this store.
That's true. That
hasn't happened yet. So
right,
obviously cast iron is fantastic.
And cast is with a K.
It is.
Cast iron soda works. Tons of bottled soda.
Yeah.
And
It's on tap as well.
They make their own root beer. They make their own, or do they make their own ice cream? But
I believe they bring that in.
And then they have like a whole bar that you could sit up at. They have couches, they have high tops, they have booths, and tons of games. In fact, for those of you guys watching, you see this huge Scrabble board, so you could bring teams and play Scrabble as a team.
Teams.
But no, I doubt anybody's board is going to look better than this one, because that's just a great board.
Right.
Youngstown Click on the Scrabble board.
So yeah, that's one for the family locally. If you're into any sort of hunting or shooting sports, the Salem Hunt Club is actually not bad at all. It's a family-oriented environment there as well.
Okay, do you have to be a member?
Membership only.
Okay.
But they do have all sorts of programs there as well.
Nice.
They recently just started up a youth marksmanship team.
Really?
So I don't know the details on that. I have nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
But I'm actually
But
on the
it's
board
events
there.
for the kids. Oh,
Right,
are you?
right.
Okay.
And then I think in May they have their Youth Day coming up, which is a
Nice.
free event. I believe it's
For the community?
anybody.
Okay, the youth.
So it's
the
7 to
community.
I think it's 7 or 8 to 17.
All right, so are they on Facebook or the website or something?
Yeah, so that would
Okay.
be salemhuntingclub.com.
Got it.
Or Salem Hunting Club on Facebook. You should be
Okay.
able to find them.
Do you know I've never been fishing? I wish I was a part of an organization like that.
Right.
I would have been fishing as a kid. Anyway.
Fishing tests my patience. I can't catch anything, so it's not my thing. But for some people, they love it. I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I like a short thing. So that's also local. So
Okay. No pizza joints that you like?
Salem probably has 25 pizza places in it, so they all argue about who the best pizza
Who's the
is.
best
so
pizza?
try them all.
Okay. All right, we'll do that.
No,
We'll do
seriously though, there probably is 15 pizza places in Salem.
Wow. I was disappointed to see that Alfredo's Pizza closed.
It did.
I like them. They had an upside down pizza.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a pizza and then they slapped the same kind of pizza on top, but like upside down. Oh my goodness.
That
It
sounds
was
amazing.
so good. It was so good. And then that Gino's pizza up there, they have that huge pizza, right?
Yep.
And
And then-
Josie's Pizza.
There's like 15 of them.
Okay. So if you guys like
That's no
pizza,
joke.
come to Salem to try their pizza. Is that fair? That'd be a
fair.
good third one. All the
That's
pizza
fair.
in Salem.
Well, and then in June, the Salem Super Cruise happens.
Oh,
So-
yes.
So that's usually mid-June over the weekend. There's cars from all over the state here.
Wow.
Lots of muscle cars, lots of sports cars, all of that. And State Street is pretty much locked down.
That's amazing. So it's sports cars, muscle cars.
Oh, trucks, everything. If
Really?
you have anything with wheels, basically, you can bring it.
That's cool. So
And
it's not
takes
just one
over-
category.
It takes over Salem.
Wow. And then there's like bands and stuff like that.
Yep. Bands and
fun.
booths and, all.
Is it like a free event or do? Wow. So
completely
people
free.
just come
Yeah.
to downtown Salem and enjoy the
It's
cars.
Probably a big economic boost for the area as
Oh,
well.
that's huge. Yeah.
So all the small businesses are open.
See?
There's people sitting on the sidewalks just in front of cast iron even. So,
To watch
it's up and down the streets, and then there's several different small car
Are the cars
shows
like parked or do they like
some are
like
parked
a
and then they
parade type
loop
thing?
they loop around.
they loop.
There's several different businesses that shut off their parking lots, and those are parking areas for the
love
people
it.
in the car shows.
I love it.
So
Very
that's
cool.
always a fun event, but it's not year round. So I was thinking year round stuff. So
Right, right. Well, hey, that works.
yeah, that's coming up in
That
June. It's
works.
always a good
I'm
time
sure
though.
there's people listening that have never even heard of it, don't even know that it exists.
Right.
So that's kind of fun. So it'll happen in June.
Right. And then they hit the drag strip in Salem as well, and
Oh.
drag racing and all that. So it's
There's
fun.
a drag strip here? Really?
Yeah. You probably passed it on the way here if you came
Maybe I
down
did.
62.
I did.
Yeah, you would have passed it.
Okay. Sweet. That'd be fun. That'd be fun
yeah.
to watch them race. All right. Well, thank you guys. Always, always, always remember that you are the best part of what makes Youngstown click. And no matter where you are in your relationships, whether you have one or you're struggling in one or you're happy in one, there's always room for improvement. And you are not alone. You're not broken. You're not somehow messed up. Everybody goes through the struggle. Everybody has those miscommunications. So just be encouraged that no matter where you're at or what you're going through, there is a light, there is hope, and you are such an asset to not only the people in your life, but to the community at large. And we're thankful that you are in Youngstown Click. Thank you for listening. And until next time, you guys are amazing. We'll talk to you later.